Building security arrests black woman's daughter. 5 minutes later, she fires their boss. The polished glass doors of the Rosedale corporate tower gleamed under the early morning sun. Inside the pristine marble lobby, the scent of citrus cleaner still lingered in the air as a few sharply dressed employees filtered in, heels clicking and briefcases swinging. Just before 8 o'clock a.m., everything about the high-rise pulsed with routine professionalism until it didn't. "Stop right there!" The sudden bark from a uniformed security officer echoed off the walls. Heads turned. A young girl, no more than 16, froze just steps from the elevator bank. Her name was Naomi Taylor, a smart, quietly confident black teenager with shoulder-length curly hair, a navy blue backpack slung over her shoulder, and a visitor badge clearly visible on her hoodie. She looked startled, understandably so, at the aggression in the man's voice. The guard, Officer Rick Danner, was in his early 50s, heavy-set with thinning blonde hair tucked under his navy cap. He walked toward her with unnecessary speed, hand already on his belt radio. "You can't be in here unsupervised." "Where's your parent? Do you even have an appointment?" Naomi swallowed hard. "My mom works here. I'm just going up to meet her." Danner scoffed. "Sure you are. That's what they all say. Hand over your ID." "She left a pass at the front desk. The receptionist gave me this badge already." "I said ID. Now." The badge trembled slightly as Naomi reached for her wallet. A second guard, younger but equally stern, flanked Danner. By now, a few early birds waiting for the elevators were watching. 2 women whispered. A man in a charcoal suit subtly pulled out his phone. Danner glanced at the name on Naomi's visitor badge, Naomi Taylor, and smirked. "Taylor? You think that means anything to me?" Naomi's eyes darted toward the receptionist, a nervous young woman who suddenly found deep interest in her keyboard. "I'm not causing trouble. I'm just here for—" But she didn't get to finish. With a swift motion, Danner grabbed her wrist, pulling her away from the elevators. "You're being detained for trespassing. Hands behind your back." "What?" she cried out, panic rising. "This is a mistake. Call my mom. She's literally upstairs." "I don't take orders from loiterers." As he reached for his zip ties, a stern voice cut through the lobby like a gunshot. "Let her go." Everyone froze. Striding through the glass doors with measured fury was Angela Taylor, late 30s, elegant and commanding in a tailored black suit and stiletto heels. Her natural hair was braided into a tight bun, and a Department of Justice badge gleamed on her hip. Behind her marched 2 men and 1 woman in tactical jackets, all clearly federal agents. Angela didn't break stride. "Officer Danner, you have 5 seconds to remove your hands from my daughter," she said, voice cool but deadly, "or I will have you restrained in front of this entire building." Danner's hand hovered in the air, eyes flicking from Angela's badge to the approaching agents. Wait, she was trespassing. No ID. I didn't know." "Her ID was with your front desk. You violated internal building protocol, my daughter's civil rights, and my patient's." Angela stepped closer until they were eye to eye. "And you did it with a smugness that suggests this isn't your first time profiling someone who looks like her." The air in the lobby went heavy. The younger guard stepped back, face paling. Angela turned to Naomi, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, baby?" Naomi nodded slowly, lips trembling but steady. "I told him who you were. He didn't care." Angela didn't look at Danner. Not yet. Instead, she spoke into a radio on her hip. "Unit B, proceed to lobby." Within moments, 6 more agents in navy windbreakers entered through the service hallway, armed with clipboards and body cams. A man in a gray suit appeared next, eyes wide, badge visible, internal affairs. "What's going on?" he asked. Angela's voice dropped, calm and unshakable. Effective immediately, I'm exercising my authority as DOJ Senior Liaison for Federal Property Security Oversight. That includes this building and all private contractors employed within it. She turned to the Internal Affairs Officer. Mr. Bell, please detain Officer Danner for excessive force and racial profiling. I want the security tapes pulled, and I want his supervisor brought down here in the next 5 minutes. You can't do this, Danner stammered, now trembling as one of the federal agents pulled out zip ties, ironically the very same ones he had nearly used on Naomi. Angela finally turned to him. Oh, I can, because I am your boss's boss, and right now I'm starting an investigation that might cost you a whole lot more than your job. A silence hung thick in the air as Danner was cuffed, read his rights, and led out through the same lobby he had once policed with swagger. The same crowd that had earlier watched Naomi with suspicion now stared in stunned silence, guilt written across their faces. Angela straightened her jacket, turned to the crowd, and addressed them with razor-sharp clarity. You all saw what just happened. I want you to ask yourselves why no one spoke up when a child was being handled like a criminal. That question? You'll carry it with you longer than he carries those cuffs. She then guided Naomi gently to the elevators, the agents following like a silent procession. As the doors closed, Naomi looked up at her mother, voice barely above a whisper. You didn't have to come like that. Angela smiled softly. Yes, I did. Because you deserve to walk into any building in America without fear. And I'll show the world that every time I have to. The elevator dinged. They rose. Upstairs, a trembling HR manager was about to get the worst morning of his life. Naomi sat on the cold bench in the building's security office, her wrists still sore from the plastic zip ties they'd used to restrain her. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was clenched in defiance. She refused to give the 2 guards, especially the older one, Scott, a single tear more than he already got. She's lucky we didn't call the cops, Scott mumbled as he filled out a report. Teenagers these days think they can just waltz in anywhere. Naomi looked up sharply. I told you, I live here, apartment 43B. You saw my access card. Which was fake, Scott snapped, without looking up, just like that attitude. The younger guard, Malalik, shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't spoken much since the incident, but Naomi had caught his glances, uncertain, almost guilty. Maybe he wasn't as sure about this arrest as his partner. She sat back, pulse racing. Why hadn't her mom called yet? Angela Taylor was always quick to respond. Maybe she was in a meeting. Maybe her phone was off. Or maybe... The door burst open. Angela Taylor didn't walk in. She strode in with the controlled force of a woman who didn't ask for respect. She demanded it. I want her released, she said, voice like ice cutting through Sieg. Scott stood up immediately, eyes wide. Ma'am, who are you? Angela's eyes narrowed. The mother of the girl you just assaulted, and the executive director of Taylor Holdings, the company that owns this building. Dead silence. Naomi's lips parted slightly. Mom, Angela didn't even glance at her daughter yet. She was locked in on Scott. You zip-tied and detained a resident's daughter in this building without verifying anything except your own ignorance. Am I understanding that right? Scott stammered. She refused to give ID and she mouthed off, She's 17. You're a grown man. And you laid hands on her. Angela took one step closer. Where's your supervisor? Malik jumped in nervously. He's not on site today. It's just us for this shift. Angela turned to her daughter now. Are you okay, baby? Naomi, cheeks flushed, nodded. I tried calling. They took my phone. Angela spun back to them. You took her phone. She was filming, Scott muttered defensively. Because you were detaining her, Angela fired back. On my property. Scott's face turned crimson. Malik stepped back like he wanted to disappear into the wall. Angela pulled out her own phone and hit a contact. Marvin! Angela, I want all security feeds from the West Lobby this morning, and I want Johnson and Lewis. Yes, both of them, relieved of duty immediately. Scott's mouth dropped. Wait, relieved? Angela hung up. You don't work for the property management firm, she said quietly. You work for me. That was when the air shifted. Scott realized he wasn't in control anymore, and hadn't been the moment she walked in. You should have checked her last name, Angela added. Taylor, as in Taylor Holdings. Scott looked at Malik, who looked like he might faint. We didn't know. No one said anything. Angela laughed just once, short and cold. You didn't ask, you assumed, and now you've humiliated a resident and manhandled a minor. The silence was suffocating. Angela looked down at Naomi, whose hands still bore faint red marks from the zip ties. Her eyes flickered with something Angela hadn't seen before. Not just hurt, but shame. I want an incident report from both of you on my desk in 1 hour, Angela said flatly. And if either of you leave out a single detail, your termination won't just be from this building, it'll be permanent across the entire company. Scott opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Angela didn't wait. She walked over to Naomi, gently cupping her face, inspecting her. They hurt you? Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Not badly. Angela turned, breathing hard. Come on, let's go. As they stepped out into the hallway, a woman from leasing passed by and did a double take. Oh, Miss Taylor, we didn't know you were in the building this morning. Angela gave her a thin smile. Apparently no one did. They walked in silence to the elevator. As the doors closed, Naomi finally said, I didn't want to call you. I thought I could handle it. Angela looked at her, softened. You shouldn't have to handle people treating you like a criminal in your own home. Naomi blinked. You were amazing back there. Angela smiled faintly. Sometimes power only matters if you're willing to use it. But Naomi wasn't smiling. She leaned back against the elevator wall. They didn't believe I belonged, Mom. Even when I told them where I lived. Even when I showed them the card. Angela nodded slowly. That's the part they won't put in the report. But I will. Naomi glanced at her. What do you mean? Angela's jaw tightened. This isn't over. As the elevator opened onto the penthouse floor, Angela turned to her daughter. If they think this is just about you being my daughter, they're wrong. This is about every kid who's been judged before they've had a chance to speak. Naomi stepped out, following her mother. Her heart was still bruised, but something stronger was building underneath it. And neither of them noticed Malik watching from the security monitor, his expression unreadable, except for the fear in his eyes. He knew exactly what was coming. And it wasn't just a suspension. It was a reckoning. Angela Taylor stood frozen for a moment as the elevator doors slid shut behind her. She had never in her life moved so fast. Her heels echoed through the marble lobby like warning shots, sharp and unrelenting, as she marched straight toward the front desk. The entire building seemed to quiet, as her presence radiated authority and fury. Behind the desk, Malik Carter was mid-conversation with someone on the radio, but when he saw Angela approaching like a storm front, he froze. The younger officer's eyes darted to the security monitor, then back to her. Panic flickered on his face. Where is she? Angela demanded, her voice cool but vibrating with rage. Malik swallowed hard. Ma'am, Ms. Taylor, I didn't know. I asked you a question. She's in the back security office, Malik replied, voice cracking. They brought her in for questioning. Angela didn't wait for another word. She stormed past the reception desk toward the narrow hallway marked Authorized Personnel Only, swiping her executive clearance badge without hesitation. The door clicked open. Inside, Naomi sat in a cold metal chair, her wrists still red from the cuffs that had been removed minutes earlier. Her arms were crossed and her face was blank, but her eyes burned. Across from her stood Scott Matthews, arms folded, smugness still lingering in the curl of his lip. Scott turned when he heard the door slam open. "Ma'am, this is a restricted—" "Get away from my daughter," Angela said, low and sharp. Scott's confidence faltered for a brief second. "Ms. Taylor, I apologize, but there was a security concern and we followed standard procedure. Your daughter refused to provide ID." "She's 17, Scott," Angela snapped, "and you had her detained like a criminal. She told you she was waiting for me. I have her visitor credentials on file for this morning. Did you even check?" Scott opened his mouth, but Malik's voice suddenly rang from the doorway behind her. "No, ma'am, he didn't. He told me to skip the system and just take her in." Angela turned to Malik. The young man looked mortified. "Are you confirming that?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "She told him her name, said she was here to see you. He told me not to run her name and to call backup." Angela stared at Scott. "Do you know what you've just done?" Scott straightened. "I was following my instincts. You can't be too careful these days." Angela took a step closer. "Instincts? You mean your bias? You saw a young black girl in designer sneakers and assumed she didn't belong. You thought she was lying. You escalated a situation that didn't require anything but basic decency." Scott scoffed. "With all due respect, Miss Taylor, I didn't ask about her race. I treated her the way I would have treated anyone." Angela's eyes narrowed. "You treated her like a threat. You humiliated her. And now you're standing here trying to justify it to her mother." There was silence. Then Naomi stood slowly. "You didn't even ask me if I needed help," she said to Scott. Her voice was calm but heavy. "You didn't ask if I was lost. You didn't even ask my name. You just told Malik to cuff me." Angela turned to her daughter, her face softening. "Are you okay?" Naomi nodded once. "I'm fine. I just want to go home." Angela looked back at Scott. "That won't be necessary. You're done here." Scott blinked. "Excuse me?" Angela's voice was ice. "You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. Your badge. Now." "You can't be serious." "I said now." Scott, stunned, slowly unpinned the silver security badge from his uniform and placed it on the desk. Angela didn't even glance at it. Her eyes stayed locked on him. "And don't think I won't be filing a report with your security agency. You'll be lucky if you're guarding a storage unit after this." Malik stood stiffly in the doorway, eyes wide. "Ma'am, what about me?" Angela paused, then walked over to him. Her tone shifted, slightly warmer. "You followed orders, but next time don't forget your judgment. If someone tells you something doesn't feel right, speak up. You have a brain. Use it." "Yes, ma'am," he said, clearly shaken. Angela turned back to Naomi. "Let's go." As they walked through the lobby together, a few employees glanced their way and quickly looked down. Whispers began to ripple in their wake. Naomi kept her head high, but her hand tightened around her mother's. "They looked at me like I was a criminal," she murmured. Angela looked down at her. "They won't do that again." Naomi hesitated. "You think it's over?" Angela exhaled. "No, it's just beginning." Because what Angela didn't tell Scott or anyone else was that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened in that building, and now she was going to make sure it was the last. Angela's phone buzzed in her pocket. She answered quickly. "James, I need you to pull every security report from the last 90 days. Specifically, any incidents involving visitors of color. Yes, right now." As the elevator doors closed behind them, Naomi glanced up. "You're really gonna go after them, aren't you?" Angela didn't hesitate. "I'm going to burn the whole damn system down and rebuild it the right way." And for the first time that day, Naomi smiled. Not because justice had been served yet, but because she knew without a doubt that her mother wasn't just fighting for her. She was fighting for everyone who'd ever been treated like they didn't belong. Scott stood near the lobby entrance with his arms crossed, the morning sun casting long shadows through the massive glass panels of the corporate headquarters. He was feeling pretty damn good about himself. After all, yesterday's incident had put him back in the good graces of head of security. Malik, still clearly uncomfortable, avoided eye contact as they finished the morning sweep. "You did the right thing," Scott said to him casually, a smug grin tugging at his lips. "Kid like that, causing a scene, no badge, no appointment? You can't take chances these days." Malik didn't respond. His jaw clenched slightly, and his eyes briefly flicked toward the security monitor behind Scott, which showed the side entrance Naomi had been dragged through the day before. His gut still twisted when he thought about it. But Scott moved like he was untouchable. That illusion shattered just after 9:12 a.m. Angela Taylor stepped through the front doors like a storm, flawless, fierce, composed. Her navy blue power suit cut sharp against her dark skin, and the clack of her heels on the marble echoed like a metronome of reckoning. Scott noticed her immediately. He straightened his tie, then narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, can I help you?" he said, not recognizing her. Angela turned to him slowly. "No, Scott, but I believe you and I have something to discuss." His brows furrowed. "Wait, how do you—" "Security meeting, 9:15 a.m., executive floor, be there, and bring Malik." Angela didn't wait for a response. She walked straight to the elevator, swiped a platinum clearance badge from her handbag, and vanished behind the stainless steel doors. Scott's mouth opened, then closed. His face paled. "How the hell does she have that kind of clearance?" he muttered. Malik stared at him, finally meeting his eyes. "You don't know who she is, do you?" Scott's silence said it all. Upstairs, in a top-floor conference room overlooking the city skyline, the temperature felt 10 degrees colder than the thermostat read. Angela stood at the head of the table. On the wall behind her, a monitor displayed the company's organizational chart. Her name sat squarely at the top, Chief Executive Officer. Scott walked in with Malik, his eyes bouncing between Angela and the room's sterile, glass-walled edges. His confidence bled out with every step. Angela waited for the door to close before she spoke. "Yesterday, my daughter was physically restrained, humiliated, and falsely accused of trespassing in the very building where I serve as CEO." Scott blinked rapidly. "Wait, your daughter?" "Yes, Naomi Taylor, 17, honors student. Waiting in the lobby to bring me lunch before her college tour." Malik shifted nervously, but Scott scoffed, forcing a thin smile. "Well, with all due respect, ma'am, we were just doing our job. She didn't follow protocol." "She didn't have to," Angela cut him off sharply. "Her name is on my authorized list. It always has been. And if you had bothered to look, you would have seen it. Instead, you profiled her. You assumed she didn't belong, and you manhandled my child." There was a long, brittle silence. Then Angela pressed a button on the remote and played the security footage. The entire room watched Scott grab Naomi's wrist, pull her back from the elevator, then escort her roughly out of frame. Her voice on the recording trembled as she said, "I'm just here to see my mom. Her name is Angela Taylor." Malik winced. Scott went pale. Angela stopped the recording. "I could have had you escorted out of this building already, but I believe in accountability, and I want you to understand the gravity of what you did before I make that decision." Scott's bravado cracked. "Ms. Taylor, Angela, I didn't know. I truly thought—" "No," she interrupted again, eyes burning. "You didn't think. You judged. Based on her skin, her age, and her confidence. That is not security. That is prejudice." He stood in silence, his eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. Angela turned to Malik. "You were there too?" Malik nodded, eyes lowered. I hesitated. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry." Angela held his gaze. "You still have a choice. What you do next matters. This company has no room for silence in the face of injustice." Then she turned back to Scott. "Effective immediately, you're relieved of duty. Your access will be revoked by noon. Security will escort you out after this meeting." Scott flinched. "You're firing me?" Angela stared at him. "You fired yourself the moment you put your hands on my daughter." He staggered back a step as if physically struck. "You can't do this." "I just did." The door opened. 2 guards entered corporate security, not under Scott's now defunct chain of command. As they approached, he turned desperately to Malik. "Say something. You were there. Help me out, man." Malik shook his head slowly. "I saw what I saw. You crossed a line." Scott looked back at Angela one last time, but her gaze didn't soften. He was escorted out, silent and stunned. Back in the lobby, Naomi was waiting. Angela stepped out of the elevator and walked toward her. Naomi stood up, still unsure, the trauma of the day before not yet gone. Angela reached her daughter and embraced her, long and tight. "It's over," she whispered. "No one will ever lay a hand on you again in this building." Naomi pulled back, blinking. "You really fired him?" "I did more than that," Angela replied. "I made sure everyone watching knows it was wrong. That's how change starts." Naomi smiled for the first time in 24 hours. But upstairs, behind one of the smoked glass doors on the same floor Angela just left, someone else was watching the playback of the meeting. A man in a gray suit, leaning back in a chair, phone pressed to his ear. "She moved fast," he said into the receiver. "Fired him on the spot." A pause. "Yes, that woman is going to be a problem for us." He ended the call without saying goodbye. His eyes lingered on the paused frame of Angela Taylor standing over Scott, her authority undeniable. This wasn't over yet, not for them. Not by a long shot. Naomi Taylor sat in her car, parked just 2 blocks from the courthouse, staring blankly at the dashboard. The events from the previous day played on a loop in her head, her mother's eyes flashing with a quiet fury as the security team humiliated her. Scott's hand gripping her arm like she didn't belong, and the condescending smirk from the judge before dismissing her presence altogether. She had never seen Angela Taylor speechless like that. It scared her more than anything. And now she was furious, not just at the system, not just at the security guards or the courtroom or even the pilot, but at herself. Because for a moment she had stood there, frozen, allowing it to happen. Her phone vibrated. A message from Malik. "Malik. Got something. You won't believe this. Meet me in the archives." She grabbed her bag and jumped out of the car. Inside the courthouse basement, the archives room was dim, dusty, and felt like a place forgotten by time. Malik, a junior clerk who had been quietly helping her dig into court records, stood beside a table stacked with old files and digital printouts. "Naomi," he said, lowering his voice, "you were right. This wasn't just about your mom walking into the wrong courtroom. Look at this." He slid a file toward her. Inside were records of previous incidents tied to Officer Scott. Several complaints, all buried, most from black women. Naomi's stomach clenched. They buried all of this. "They didn't just bury it," Malik said, his eyes sharp. "They protected him. You see this? That judge you faced, Carson, he dismissed 2 of those complaints himself." Naomi looked up, fire behind her gaze. "We're not just dealing with prejudice. We're dealing with a pattern, a system." Malik nodded. "That's not even the twist. Scott's department just got a grant major federal funding, signed off by a woman named Barbara Knox. She was scheduled to meet with Angela yesterday. Naomi felt the ground shift beneath her. That's why she was there. It's bigger than we thought. They knew she was coming, and they tried to humiliate her before the meeting ever happened. Her hands shook slightly, a mix of rage and adrenaline. They tried to control the narrative before it could be written. "I got something else," Malik added. "Security footage from the courthouse lobby. Look at this." He opened a laptop and played the clip. There it was, Scott watching Angela enter. And just before stepping toward her, he pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Naomi paused the video. "Can you trace who he texted?" Malik smirked. "Already did. Same number used to contact 2 reporters at a local paper. They printed a story this morning. One claiming Angela caused a disturbance at the courthouse." Her chest tightened. "They're trying to discredit her." All coordinated. From inside, she leaned against the table, breathing slowly. Her mother's composure, her strength, it had never been more vital than now. And now Naomi knew she couldn't sit on the sidelines. "We go public," she said firmly, "but not until I make them say it. On record. Every lie, every twist. I want it all out in the open." "You're going to confront them?" Malik asked. "I'm going to drag the truth out of them in open court." Later that day, Naomi requested a formal review hearing, citing misconduct and civil rights violations. Most clerks gave her the side eye. A young black woman walking in with no badge, no legal representation, just a storm of evidence and a will made of iron. They didn't take her seriously until she walked into Judge Carson's chambers with a USB, 2 printed affidavits, and Malik at her side. Carson looked at her over his glasses, unimpressed. "Miss Taylor, what exactly do you think you're doing?" "I'm filing a formal complaint with the Oversight Board. Here's evidence of coordinated bias and misconduct tied to one of your officers and to your own courtroom decisions." He narrowed his eyes. "I suggest you be careful about the accusations you make in this room." "I suggest you start reading," Naomi shot back, planting the files on his desk. Carson skimmed through them, his expression hardening with each page. But what he hadn't expected, what neither he nor Scott anticipated, was that Naomi had already shared copies with a state investigator. And when that investigator walked into the courtroom that afternoon, quietly taking a seat in the gallery, everything shifted. Outside the courtroom, Angela Taylor stood in silence, watching, waiting. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. "They're rattled. They know you're back." Angela looked up through the tinted windows of her SUV and saw Officer Scott standing outside the building, visibly agitated, talking into his phone. Inside, Naomi began speaking. "This isn't about a mistake," she said, addressing the court. "It's about a system that's rigged to protect the people who break the rules while punishing those who stand for something better." Judge Carson interrupted. "You're not a lawyer, Ms. Taylor." "No," Naomi said. "I'm something worse. I'm a witness who won't back down." The investigator stood and handed Carson a sealed envelope. "This is from the Attorney General's office. A formal inquiry has been opened. You are now required to submit all communications tied to Officer Scott's conduct over the past year." Carson's face dropped. Scott, watching from the hallway, suddenly stormed off. Naomi smiled slightly. "Looks like the truth just filed a subpoena." Outside, Angela finally stepped out of the car. Scott froze when he saw her. Angela walked past him, slow and deliberate, her heels clicking on the marble. She said nothing, but her presence alone struck harder than any words. Inside, Carson slammed his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned until further review." But the damage was done. The cover had cracked. As Naomi and Malik walked out, whispers followed them. Some supportive, some stunned. Most in disbelief that 2 staffers, 1 intern, 1 junior clerk, had just triggered an inquiry that would shake the foundation of the courthouse. That night, Naomi received another message. Unknown. You just made the front pay and our enemies. Be careful. But Naomi wasn't afraid. She had already inherited her mother's fire. And now she was starting to burn her own path through the walls built to stop her. The moment Angela stepped out of the black SUV and onto the courthouse steps, a wave of quiet attention rippled through the crowd outside. Cameras shifted. Reporters turned their heads. Even a few onlookers gasped as they recognized her. She didn't acknowledge any of it. Her focus was razor-sharp. Inside, the hallway buzzed with tension. Naomi, flanked by 2 federal marshals, was already seated at the end of the hallway, pale but composed. She turned when she saw her mother approaching and stood immediately. "Mom," she whispered. Angela wrapped her arms around her daughter. "You're okay. That's all that matters," she said, pulling back to look Naomi straight in the eyes. They messed with the wrong family. Just then, the door to courtroom 2B opened. Officer Scott stood just inside, along with Officer Daniels. Angela's eyes met his, and in that fleeting moment, he recognized her. His face dropped. "No way," Scott murmured. Angela stepped inside calmly but with undeniable authority. She was dressed not just as a mother, but as the Deputy Director of the Department of Justice. Her badge had already cleared several layers of security without question. The judge, an older white man named Judge Franklin, glanced up as the courtroom quieted. His eyes narrowed when he saw Angela and the 2 federal marshals at her side. "Is there a reason you're interrupting my courtroom?" he asked, sounding annoyed. Angela didn't flinch. "Yes. There's been a serious miscarriage of justice here. You detained my daughter without charge, allowed her to be harassed by 2 officers who falsified a police report, and then set an emergency hearing without legal representation present." Judge Franklin blinked, as if trying to piece it all together. "And who exactly are you to make those claims?" She walked straight to the center of the courtroom, reached into her coat, and pulled out her ID. "I'm Angela Taylor, Deputy Director, Department of Justice." Gasps filled the room. The 2 officers standing by the prosecution table stiffened. Malik, the lower-ranking officer who had tried to voice concerns earlier, sat at the back, clearly uncomfortable. He looked down at his shoes, avoiding everyone's gaze. The judge glanced at her badge, then back up at Angela. "And what is the DOJ doing here?" Angela's voice was steady but hard as steel. "Correcting a problem your courtroom created." Daniel stepped forward, flustered. "She had a fake boarding pass. We had probable cause." Angela turned toward him slowly. "You mean the boarding pass that was issued by Continental Jetmy Airline?" Another wave of murmurs. Scott's face turned gray. Angela continued. "Not only did Naomi Taylor have a valid ticket, she was traveling under full clearance, which was verified by TSA just hours ago. The only thing you saw was her skin color." Scott stepped forward, trying to control the damage. "Look, we didn't know who she was. We acted based on suspicion and—" "That's the problem," Angela cut in. "You acted based on suspicion, not evidence. And that suspicion only seems to surface when young black women are involved." Judge Franklin cleared his throat. "That may be true, but this isn't a federal matter. It's under local jurisdiction." Angela nodded slightly. "It was, until civil rights violations entered the picture. Now it's my jurisdiction." She turned toward Malik. "Officer Malik?" His head snapped up, nervous. "Would you care to explain what really happened?" Malik hesitated. Scott gave him a subtle but stern glance. But Malik had seen enough. This was bigger than his loyalty to 2 reckless cops. "She didn't do anything," Malik said, rising to his feet. "Naomi complied with everything. Scott and Daniels overstepped. She kept asking to call her parent, and they refused. I told them we should double-check the information, but they ignored me." Angela turned to the judge. "You've now heard testimony from an eyewitness officer contradicting your entire case." I'd like the charges dropped immediately and an investigation opened into the conduct of Officers Scott and Daniels. The judge looked as though he was trying to find a way out. There are no formal charges filed. She was being held pending verification of identity. Angela's voice turned ice cold. Held without charge, without counsel, and without access to her guardian, me. That's unlawful detention of a minor. There was a beat of silence. Ms. Taylor, Judge Franklin finally said, your points are valid. The court will dismiss the matter entirely, and the record will reflect no wrongdoing on Naomi Taylor's part. Angela nodded once. That's a start. She turned to Naomi and walked over, wrapping her arm around her. Let's go. As they reached the exit, Scott called out, Ma'am, we didn't mean... Angela stopped at the door and turned slowly. Her eyes met his. Intent doesn't erase the harm, and it sure as hell won't protect your badge. They walked out into the corridor where the press had already begun to gather. A few flashes lit up the hallway, but Angela didn't stop. She kept her arm around her daughter, moving forward. As they reached the stairwell, Naomi looked up at her. Do you think they'll be held accountable? Angela paused, then said, They will, but more importantly, so will the system that let them think they'd get away with it. Naomi exhaled slowly. I didn't know you'd come like that. You just showed up and shut it all down. Angela gave her a small smile. You're my daughter. I'd burn down the whole building if I had to. Outside, the air was crisp. Angela guided Naomi to the car, where 2 DOJ agents opened the door. But just as she was about to step in, Angela's phone rang. She checked the caller ID. It was the Attorney General. She picked up. Yes. A pause, then a sharp voice on the other end. Angela, there's been chatter. The officers weren't acting alone. We're pulling some files. You might be in the middle of something much bigger. Angela's jaw tightened. She glanced at Naomi, now seated inside. Then we dig, Angela said, because they came for my daughter, and I'm not stopping until we know why. She hung up, closed the door, and looked back at the courthouse. The real fight had just begun. Angela sat silently in the back of the black SUV as it pulled into the underground parking structure of the courthouse. Her fingers tapped lightly against the leather armrest, betraying a storm of emotion beneath her calm exterior. Today wasn't just about clearing her daughter's name. It was about exposing a system that allowed people like Officer Barrett to wield unchecked power. Naomi sat beside her, chin lifted in quiet defiance, her hand occasionally tightening into a fist and releasing, as though physically holding back the rage that had been simmering since that day in the terminal. I'm proud of you, Angela whispered, glancing at her daughter. Naomi met her eyes. We're not done yet, are we? Not even close. They stepped out into a blinding wave of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Miss Taylor, is it true the officer falsified the report? Naomi, how do you respond to the charges of trespassing? Angela didn't flinch. She placed a firm hand on Naomi's back and guided her through the crowd, flanked by Scott and Malik. Scott, now fully aware of who Angela was, moved like a shadow hyper-vigilant professional and a touch embarrassed at how he had misjudged her before. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Barrett stood at the defense table, smug in his uniform, flanked by an expensive defense attorney and a few officers from his precinct seated behind him in quiet solidarity. Angela saw them and narrowed her eyes. She had expected this camaraderie among the corrupt. The presiding judge, Marlene Pritchard, was a stoic woman in her 60s, known for her strict demeanor and no-nonsense courtroom. Angela respected her, but also knew that public perception, especially under media pressure, could either be a catalyst for justice or a shield for cowardice. Angela rose, her presence commanding. Your Honor, before we proceed, I respectfully request that this courtroom allow a new piece of evidence to be entered into the record, one that has come to light only within the last 48 hours. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Angela nodded to Malik, who stood and approached the court clerk with a flash drive. This footage was recovered from the airport's internal security archives. Strangely, it was originally marked as corrupted until my tech team reviewed the metadata. What you're about to see not only confirms Naomi Taylor's innocence, but exposes a pattern of misconduct that dates back at least 6 months. The screen lit up. A grainy but clear video showed Barrett confronting Naomi in the lounge. His body language was aggressive from the start. He didn't ask for ID. He demanded it. And then, before she could even fully respond, he handcuffed her roughly. The gasps from the courtroom were immediate. The footage then cut to a sequence of other incidents, quickly edited. A young Latino boy being shoved without cause, a Muslim woman being dragged away while pleading, all encounters involving Barrett. Angela turned toward the gallery. These were not isolated incidents. Officer Barrett has been using his badge as a license for racial profiling and intimidation. Barrett's attorney shot up. Your Honor, we object to this character assassination. These videos are taken out of context. The judge silenced him with a single glare. You will remain seated unless you have a legal basis to challenge the admissibility. So far, I see none. Angela didn't stop there. She pulled out a thick manila folder. This is a series of internal complaints made against Officer Barrett, each one mysteriously dismissed or marked as inconclusive. Included in the list is an anonymous report from an officer within his own department. That officer is now prepared to testify. A figure rose from the back of the courtroom. It was Officer James McMillan Young, nervous but clearly determined. McMillan approached the stand, hands slightly trembling. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Angela said. Officer James McMillan, Los Angeles Police Department. Tell us what you witnessed. He looked directly at Barrett, then back at Angela. I've seen him falsify reports, exaggerate claims, and target passengers of color while ignoring actual violations from others. I tried to report it. My supervisors told me to keep quiet, said Barrett had friends in high places. The room fell into a hush. Judge Pritchard leaned forward. Mr. McMillan, are you prepared to sign an affidavit under oath confirming your statements? Yes, Your Honor, Barrett finally exploded. This is a witch hunt. They're trying to smear me. Angela didn't flinch. You smeared yourself, Officer Barrett. All we did was pull back the curtain. The judge banged her gavel. That's enough. Given this new evidence and sworn testimony, I'm moving to suspend proceedings until the Internal Affairs Unit completes their full investigation. Furthermore, I am ordering Officer Barrett to surrender his badge and firearm immediately. Barrett turned pale. His attorney tried to argue, but the damage was done. A bailiff approached and reached for Barrett's sidearm. Barrett recoiled. You can't do this. I've been on the force 12 years. And that's 12 years too long if this is how you operate, Judge Pritchard said coldly. As Barrett was escorted out, Scott leaned toward Angela. I knew you were powerful, but I didn't realize you were this relentless. Angela's tone softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. When they come after my child, they don't just get a mother. They get a storm. Naomi whispered, He'll be back, won't he? Angela looked at her daughter. He might try, but next time he'll find we're not standing alone. Malik stepped forward, holding up his phone. This is going viral already. The clip of Barrett cuffing Naomi is everywhere. Public's behind us. Angela nodded, but even as the courtroom emptied, she knew this wasn't over. Barrett was just a symptom. The system was still intact, and she wasn't leaving until it wasn't. Naomi couldn't sleep the night before. Despite all the praise and relief after the confrontation in the lobby, a strange heaviness lingered in her chest. She kept replaying Scott's expression as he was escorted out, cold, unmoved, as if he believed he'd done nothing wrong. It wasn't fear she felt. It was responsibility. The kind that settled on your shoulders when you realized you could have walked away, but you didn't. Morning light filtered through the massive glass windows of Angela Taylor's penthouse office on the top floor of the very building that once tried to reject her own daughter. Now, that same building stood still, silent, awaiting its owner's next move. Angela stood near the window, arms folded, gaze locked on the city skyline. "Do you think this'll change anything?" Naomi asked quietly, stepping into the room. Angela turned. "It already has," she said, "the moment you stood your ground. That changed everything." "But what about the others?" Naomi pressed. "The tenants, the staff? Will they still whisper and avoid eye contact like I don't belong?" Angela smiled softly. "That's not our burden to carry. Their silence speaks about them, not you." Just then, her assistant Malik entered with a folder. "Ms. Taylor, the legal department finalized the terminations. Scott's out. Monica's out. Mr. Whitaker submitted his resignation this morning. Guess he didn't want to face the board." Angela didn't look surprised. "Good," she said. "Replace them with people who understand what respect means, not just customer service." Malik hesitated. "There's also a petition." Over 70 tenants signed it, apologizing to Naomi for what happened. They want to meet her formally. Naomi blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" Angela raised a brow. "Interesting." Later that afternoon, Naomi found herself standing in the same lobby where everything unfolded. This time, though, the atmosphere was entirely different. Gone were the stares and whispered judgments. People approached her directly. They shook her hand. A woman from the PR firm on the 5th floor even offered to buy her coffee, said she had a niece who needed someone like Naomi to look up to. But it was what came next that stunned everyone. One of the security guards, a quiet older black man named Jalen, stepped forward. "I've worked here 10 years, he began, voice shaking slightly. "Saw a lot of folks come and go. Saw things I shouldn't have kept quiet about. But what you did, young lady, you made it okay for the rest of us to stop being invisible." His words cracked something open in Naomi. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was just reacting to the world. She was shaping it. Angela put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I built this building because I believed in legacy. But today you reminded me legacy isn't just what we leave behind. It's what we confront while we're here." Naomi looked around. No cameras, no headlines. Just real people watching her, not as someone who needed to prove her worth, but as someone who had. Outside, reporters had gathered. News of the building's shakeup had spread fast, especially after it was revealed that Angela had quietly donated funds to civil rights organizations that morning and initiated an internal review on all management across her properties. One reporter managed to slip past security and shouted, "Ms. Taylor, what would you say to those who think this was just about one employee making a bad judgment call?" Angela didn't miss a beat. "I'd say racism rarely wears a name tag," she replied. "And when you excuse one person's prejudice, you open the door for a system to grow around it. Not on my watch." The crowd went silent, then erupted in applause. As they made their way back to the elevator, Naomi whispered, "You think this is over?" Angela smiled. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't the end. This is where we start." And just as the elevator doors closed, Naomi glanced back at the lobby, remembering how she once stood here questioned, humiliated, diminished. But not anymore. Now she stood as a symbol of resistance, of dignity, of change. And she wasn't done. This story isn't just about a building. It's about every space where someone's told they don't belong because of their skin, their age, their name, or their background. Angela and Naomi reminded us that when we stand up, not just for ourselves but for each other, we build something far more powerful than steel and concrete. We build a better world. If this story moved you, share it. Speak up when it counts. And don't forget to follow this channel for more stories that challenge injustice and celebrate courage. You never know who needs to hear this today. Are you ready to be someone's Angela?